Our gospel today comes from the book of Luke, the 15th chapter. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So the father divided his property between the 2 sons. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had, and he traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his field to feed the pigs. Now he would have gladly filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare? But here I am, dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father, but while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and he put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. And the slave replied, 'Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command, yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead, and he has come to life. He was lost, and he has been found.' This is the gospel of the Lord. Be to God." Oh, the good news, the gospel of the Lord. Sorry. Please pray with me. Lord, may the meditation of our hearts and the words of my mouth be acceptable unto you, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. All right, as much as I wanted to be Britney Spears when I was growing up, my ears are not made for these microphones, so sound people, it might get a little loud because I've got it. Cool, great. So I really love parables. I think that they're an invitation to wonder. I think they're an invitation to place yourself in the story in a couple of different roles. I think they're a lot of fun. I think trying to find the one specific meaning of a parable is not what they're for, right? It can be really challenging to do that. The first time that I really remember hearing this specific parable, I mean, I grew up in a Lutheran church. I'd heard it a lot, I'm sure. But it wasn't until I heard it of my own accord and decided that it was significant that, of course, it mattered, right? Because I was about 13 years old. I was listening to music from a group called Barlow Girl. Yeah? Okay. So I was, like, super into it. I was, loving it, loving my, like, angsty but still Jesus-y, like, music. And they had this song that I can't remember the name of, right? But they read the scripture in the middle of the song. And I'd never heard someone do that in a song before, right? Because it was all like music and guitar and girl band and really cool, great. And then all of a sudden they were speaking and I was like, what is happening? And then I listened to the story and it was like I was hearing it for the first time. And right, when you're all of 13, everything is really awful, right? Being 11 to 14 years old, it's probably one of the worst times to be a human. Everything is changing, everything is really hard, people are really nice, but your friends are really mean sometimes, and it's a lot. And then you've got school and everything else going on. And so I heard this song, even though I'd heard it 1,000 times before, and I heard this story, and it was like it was the first time I had ever heard it, because all of a sudden I was hearing, but when he was still a long way off, the Father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And I didn't have words for what I was like feeling or experiencing at that time, but it broke me in a good way, right? It broke me open. It was something that I needed to hear. It was something that I needed to be reminded of, because when you're 13, you're worried about, am I doing the right things? Am I doing the wrong things? Am I being myself? Am I doing what my parents and my family want me to? Do people at school like me? There's a lot of expectations. And honestly, don't tell any 13-year-olds you know this, but it doesn't really change when you get older. You just learn to cope with it, and you learn that you are enough. But when I was 13 and I heard those words, it broke me open, and that has stuck with me for the rest of my life. The rest of my life. I grew up in the Lutheran church. I grew up going to church every Sunday. We were 1045. We always sat on the right-hand side in the second pew, right? It was something I was used to. I had heard the gospel good news. I had heard about the grace of God, but for some reason, hearing that story, the story of the prodigal son in that song, broke me. So fast forward, I don't know, 10-ish years, I'm in seminary, right? So this is a master's degree program. We're talking about everything ever in the Bible and the history of religion and all that goodness. And we're talking about the prodigal son. And y'all, I did not know what prodigal meant. I was in a master's program, and I did not know what prodigal meant. I thought it was like, to describe someone who would run away but then come back. Do y'all know what prodigal means, like actually? Okay, so I think it comes from the word prodigious. I'm not a word scholar or anything, but prodigal means to be excessive, to be generous, an abundance. So if I'm prodigious with the communion bread on a Sunday morning, it means I'm giving you like half the loaf, and you've got to figure out how to like stick it in the cup and then like eat it. Being prodigal, being a prodigal son, being a prodigal father means that you are excessive and abundant in everything that you do. And then in our story today, we hear about a son who is a prodigal, right? But not in a really good way, right? We hear about how he takes in abundance. He takes in excess, doesn't necessarily give in abundance or give in excess, but he spends in excess. And we hear about the father, who's also a prodigal father, because when his son said, hey, give me half of your estate, give all that belongs to me when you die, he didn't bat an eye, he didn't question it. He said, sure. He gave abundantly. He received. That is not what I thought the prodigal son was about. I thought the prodigal son was about when you do something bad and you run away and you think it's all like lost and over and ruined, and then you come back and you're welcomed back with loving arms. I did not know what prodigal meant. So when we think about this story, when I think about the first time that I heard this story and it really hit me and it really resonated with me, I think it is still about the abundance and the excess of being prodigious, but it's about the abundance and the excess of love, of grace, of mercy. And that is the first interpretation of this parable that I remember really sticking with. And I've heard a lot more interpretations since, because I went to seminary, right? We read a lot of commentaries, but no matter how many commentaries I read, no matter how many articles I read about the prodigal son and all of the different takes, whether it was the father who was the good guy, or the older son, or the mother, or the slave, or the goat farm, like all of the different interpretations, the one that will always stick with me is the one where I was reminded of the graciousness and abundances of God's love for me. Because when I was 13 and I felt like everything was exploding around me, when I was 13 and I felt like I could never measure up to anything, what I needed to hear was the message of God's love and grace, even when I was turned and running the opposite direction from God. Even when I was turned and running the opposite direction from my parents and what they wanted of me and all the expectations that were around me, even when I felt like I was doing the exact opposite I heard that good news of God's prodigious, excessive, abundant, and unconditional love for me. And that changed my world, because then I knew no matter how far I was astray, no matter how much I felt like I'd messed up, no matter how much I felt like I had hurt other people in my life, no matter how much I lost track of who I was, God still loved me. And I know on Wednesday, y'all had a great discussion about this text, and Amber was kind enough to send me notes on some of the questions that you had, right? And there's some really good questions, y'all. Some of y'all should think about going to seminary. We can talk after church maybe, but there were some really good questions. And the gift of these parables is that it's okay to have those questions. It is, in fact, encouraged to ask those questions, to be curious, to wonder, to place yourself in the story, to imagine what the other characters in the story were. Because when Jesus was telling these stories, it wasn't meant to be perceived in one particular way, right? Jesus was talking to a wide variety of people in a lot of different positions that needed to hear different things. There were some people who needed to hear that they were loved and valued, even though in the society that they were in, they were considered bottom of the barrel and treated so. And then there were some people who needed to hear that even when they're, at the top of the ladder, the cream of the crop, the highest of the highest, that they still need to treat others with kindness and to welcome them back. So Jesus was speaking to a wide variety of people, and we are a wide variety of people. And so when we read these parables, it's okay to not know immediately what the purpose is or what the meaning is. Instead, it's an invitation to wonder, to place yourself into the story. It's maybe even an invitation into a wilderness. I hear that's been a theme for y'all this Lenten season, right? An invitation to enter into a wilderness that is unfamiliar to you, but is hedged in by God's excessive love and grace and mercy for you. A wilderness where instead of being tempted, maybe you're invited to draw closer to the divine, to the one who created you out of and for love. Maybe these parables are an invitation into a wilderness where you can learn to love one another and as you love yourself, and love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. It is my joy and privilege to serve as the campus pastor for the public colleges and universities here in Houston. That means I'm at the University of Houston, Texas Southern University, University of Houston downtown, Houston Community College, and then eventually when I learn to clone myself, I'll also be at all the campuses of San Jacinto College and Lone Star College. So that means I get to walk with a lot of students. I get to meet a lot of students who are in various stages of their lives. I meet the freshmen who are just starting their first year of undergrad, who are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, or bright-eyed and terrified but still doing the thing anyway. I get to meet the students who are in their third year of a PhD program. I get to meet the students who are changing their major for the third or the fourth or the what have you time. I get to walk alongside the students who have endured the last 2, 3, however long it's been years of this in-between time of virtual school and in-person classes. And I know we've got lots of other students here as well who have been living in that liminal space, as pastor-y type people would call it. But it is a privilege to walk alongside them. And I want you to know that as a congregation that supports the work and the ministry that I get to do, I need you to know how important this ministry is. It is my job and my privilege to walk alongside students and to share with them the excessive, abundant, unconditional love of God. Because I got to tell you, I talk with a lot of students who feel like the prodigal son, but not in the good way. They feel like the prodigal son who has run away and squandered all their money, and they don't have anything left, and they're ashamed, and they feel like they can't even go back to their parents or the people who love them. They feel like they are unworthy to eat the pods that someone would feed to a pig. And a lot of that is because of harm that's been done in the church, right? A lot of students that I talk to, they say, oh yeah, I grew up insert denomination here, or my family is insert denomination here, but, and then they tell me the story of how they've been made to feel unwelcome, how they've been made to feel not good enough to be in church, how they've been made to wonder if God actually cares about them or loves them or is even really there at all. And so it's my job and privilege to remind them that they are loved beyond the shadow of a doubt, and that love is excessive and abundant and unconditional, and especially for the students who are LGBTQIA+. When I am with them and talking with them as an openly queer pastor, that's a whole different world for them. When I say words like, well, my wife, the look in their eyes just changes because it doesn't compute for a lot of people. Pastor and gay person, it doesn't compute. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say something like, I've never met a pastor like you. I didn't know that you could be gay and also be Christian. And then that opens up a whole other world of conversations. And these students aren't necessarily showing up and begging for Bible studies every week after that, right? But the interactions that we have are significant. Some of these students I've literally never met in person. I started this job in September of 2020. So most of my ministry was done on Instagram and Discord and GroupMe. Yeah. No one uses Facebook anymore. Apparently that's for like old people, and like I'm not, whatever, it's fine. So some of these students I've never met in person, but I've gotten in touch with them because they are part of LGBTQIA+ student groups on the campuses at UH or UHD or TSU. And we've just had casual conversations, let them know that we're here, let them know about different events going on. And I've made connections just because I'm connected with a few different people, and a student made a specific ask, and I said, hey, I know a person who could help you with that. And then they reached out to me 2 weeks later and said, hey, I just need you to know that, like, if I didn't get this thing done that I was talking about, like, I didn't know if I could go on, right? They were getting their name and their gender marker changed on their driver's license. And I connected them with someone who I know and trust in the trans community, who's also a person of faith, that was able to help them take those steps. And they said, I didn't know if I could go on if I didn't get this done. I didn't know if I could make it another year until the next opportunity I had. So I need you to know that I really appreciate what you did. I've never met a church person like you. And that's it. We haven't really interacted since then. I've never met them in person. But that is the ministry that I'm getting to do on these campuses. I'm getting to feed students at the University of Houston every week with the A.D. Bruce Religion Center. We feed about 150 students every Wednesday afternoon. And it's no secret that food insecurity is an issue on all of our college campuses, and it is just a blessing to get to break bread or naan or tortillas or whatever it is that we have on those Wednesdays. We get to share a meal together, and we get to be in community with them. And it's because congregations like you support the work that I get to do that these interactions happen. It's because of congregations like you that understand that it is part of your call as Christians to love your neighbor as yourself, that you put your money where your mouth is and you walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. And so I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being prodigious. It's a new word. Prodigious with your money, for being prodigious with your love and with your time and with your talents, because it is making a difference to our students. It's making a difference to our students. So thank you. Now I invite you, as we come to, as our time comes to a close here, I invite you to close your eyes for a second, to get comfortable. Maybe that means putting your feet firmly on the ground or kicking them up on the chair next to you or what have you. And take a deep breath in and breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe deep the breath of God that surrounds us and gives us life and whispers, you are good, you are loved, you are enough. And know that no matter what wilderness you will enter into next, you don't journey alone. And the love of God, our Father, our parent, our protector, our Redeemer, goes with you always. Amen.